All right, from Justin to Cully, September 20th. I haven't had a lot of luck. This is just all like outside of show stuff, like house problems, car problems. Like I told you, I'm getting a new car because my mechanic was like, just get fucking rid of this one,
Yeah, yeah,
get
yeah.
rid of it. So getting a new car. I came home from the 5K yesterday and I didn't have hot water. And
Oh, that's
anytime I
fun.
call a fucking HVAC guy or whatever, it's always like it's like a $500 bill minimum. I escaped with a $50 service fee today.
Oh, that's
$50
good.
service fee. So I am ecstatic. We're finally getting wins around in the Cullinane household, by the way.
There
So
you go. There you
love
go.
to see it.
So
All right.
W's
Yeah. Go ahead.
W's for Cully.
That W's for Cully. Yeah, we'll take what we can get these days for sure. So, all right. So yesterday, obviously, we were at the Colleen Ritzer 5K, which was a phenomenal event. I'll be honest with you, I'm not the most charitable human being in the world. So going to these events, it's really nice to see. That's like a lesson for me. I got to do more things like that, you know. So it's good to be a part of a show working with Kirk. He does a lot of charitable things. I know you guys did the VFW event, you know, whether last year, sometime around now we do this one. So it's good to be a part of that like energy. What was just your overall takeaway from the event itself?
Yeah, the event itself was run very well. There was a shit ton of people there.
Yeah.
I was surprised. So yeah, it seems like I believe there was only like 10 bags left over. So I think
Yep.
everyone, like for the majority of people who signed up for Team Minahan, showed up.
Yeah. What do we end
But
up having? Like 61 members of Team Minahan?
yeah, 61 people signed up. But then there were a couple people who came up and were like, "Oh, I signed up, but like not under Team Minahan, just as like
Yes.
a solo runner." So it was probably even more than that.
Yes, and luckily, yeah, there was a lot of people that showed up like that, and we really probably we just pointed like, all right, that's where the individuals go because we don't have a bag for you, unfortunately. But
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it was what it was. So I thought it was just a great event overall. I didn't know before we went into this, and Kirk had texted me. I want to say now it's like a month and a half ago at this point. I want to do a live broadcast at this show. I didn't really know how much of a role Jerry's wife had in this thing, but she was literally the point of contact through the entire There was one other media person, just because we're considered like part of the media with I think it was Magic 106.7 that was there, but she's like she has a big role in that event. That was interesting to learn throughout the process. She was super helpful to so not that she watches the wrap up show here, but thank you to Tracy Callahan. She was super helpful throughout this entire process.
My favorite Callahan.
Your favorite Callahan,
My
especially after you. I
favorite
don't know.
Callahan.
I'm kind of like I don't. Maybe I don't want to talk about the dog anymore, but I think like the dog might be my favorite Callahan. Actually, I like
No,
Jackson. Jackson's a funny
fuck
guy.
that dog.
Yeah, fuck that dog. All right, so we'll get right into it. Jerry Callahan obviously sat in on yesterday's episode. Kirk had a takeaway that the show was joyless. I guess one, let's get your take, Justin. What was your take on the show? And then two, just do you agree? Was it a joyless show?
Yeah, it was. It was. I wouldn't call it joyless because I think Kirk was trying to make it fun. He wanted to, tell these old stories, and right from the get go, I think like a minute and 30 seconds in, Jerry starts talking about. He's like, oh, uh, he already starts talking about how crazy Kirk is and all these things. And I think that was his biggest takeaway is he kept doing these subtle shots at Kirk, whether it be like, oh yeah, you have so much hate in your heart, you don't like dogs and all this other shit.
Yep.
I really think that like
Meanwhile, like 15 minutes earlier, he's like just holding a random baby that he's never met before. Like,
yeah, and then
yeah,
Jerry
yeah,
talks about that like that's weird, and it's like Kirk's like, I don't know, I like kids, I don't like dogs, and it's like,
yeah,
okay, well that's just a personal thing,
yeah.
but
I also
yeah,
don't
I
know.
think
I was talking to that Jim too. I thought the same thing in my head and then didn't do it. like he came over, introduced. He's a great guy, Jim. He came over with the baby. Like I don't even know what to do in this situation, and my brain was like, maybe I should just ask to hold the baby because it's kind of awkward, you know. Like,
oh,
but no, no. It was a nice. It was good to get those pictures. That was funny.
I guess, but I don't know. He kept saying things like, "Oh, Bruce is a mental case," and he'd be like, "Yeah, well, Bruce is a mental case just like you." And he's doing these subtle shots at Kirk over and over and over again.
Yep.
And Kirk's trying to talk about Dino stories or other funny stories from the past with fucking Bobby Orr and things like that.
Yep.
And Jerry's like, "Oh, well, we didn't have this all important lunch meeting on Saturday that apparently was planned." And Jerry seems really disappointed that they're doing this on air and not off air. But yeah, my biggest takeaway is I don't think Jerry wants anything to do with Kirk. Besides, he wants Kirk to promote his show and use Kirk whenever he needs to use the minifans
Yeah.
or do something of that matter.
I do sense like a little bit, and it's not just trying to like have Jerry's back, but he is like conflicted in some way about it. You know what I mean? Because there is kind of
Yeah,
like a
because he
family.
wants to grow his podcast, but yet he doesn't want anything to do with Kirk, and he
Yeah,
knows
no,
that
well,
Kirk is the best way. That
yeah,
yeah,
and
that's the conflict I sense.
yeah, so that's fine if you want to take it to that level, because clearly there's a benefit to Kirk Minahan marketing your podcast. So I totally agree that there's a benefit there, but I do think there's kind of like it's more than just if he was just a regular friend. After all that, there's probably a good chance that Jerry just says like, "Fuck it, I don't need friends like that in my life." And it sounded like yesterday that that was like a real point of contention for him mentally as he was working through all this stuff. Because I was kind of, and I'm not interjecting myself into it, but I was on one side of some of the shit that happened last summer. I was on a group text that happened. We referenced it briefly on the show yesterday. That to me is like that happened during like a specific time period where Kirk was on a break that like I wouldn't judge him on the future if something happened like that again while he's on a break, suffering through something. I don't judge my friends while they're suffering like that.
At their lowest point, yeah.
That's
I
a
mean,
strange thing to me. So it's one thing if next week and Kirk is in completely clear, like clean bill of health, everything is fine, and he's just like randomly serious and saying, "I'm going to kill your family." That would never fucking happen. So it's like to judge him based on that shit. It was very that was a strange thing to me. I don't know. I couldn't really wrap my brain around where he was going with that yesterday.
and also it's like you gotta look at who's saying it. I mean, it's Kirk Minahan. Jerry, you did radio with Kirk for what, 7 years? Like this
Yeah.
is what Kirk says.
Yep.
He announced what's his face dying on air when he wasn't dead.
Yep.
I forget his name. Um, Zachary. Fucking. I forget, but he's like so and so dead at like 34 or something. I guess this is just what he does. I know he wasn't being like funny, but you got to understand Kirk says things like, "I'm going to kill you. I hope you die. I hope your family dies." But it's like you got to understand it. It's coming from a place. And then Kirk also said right after, like during this, he's like, "Yes, and I apologized." I believe his exact words were, "I apologize profusely. I've apologized many times." And Jerry's like, "Yeah, but I just need to know that you won't ever do it again." And Kirk's being honest. Kirk's not going to lie to you and say this is never going to happen again. He's like, "Well, it very well could, but like you're free to walk away because this is just
Yeah.
who I am. This is
Well, it's
this
also
is
like, yeah, to your point, who you're dealing with here too. Everyone has different styles. And it's also, Jerry said to me, like, you're the most honest person in the world. If I hate somebody in that moment, I'm going to say I hate them and then fuck around with them a little bit. So I did, because I was working with Jerry, I hated when he was like, unsubscribe to Jerry's show. I hated it personally because it actually felt like, or at least I thought in my brain, it had an impact on the business we were trying to run. That has an impact. But I got where Kirk was coming from because he was pissed at Jerry. And when you're pissed at people, you say things and do things about them that are like that, So I fucking hated
yeah,
it because I was just on the wrong side of it, but I understood it. So just to assume that shit is going to happen when there's no reason to think there's just no reason to think it's going to happen again unless you do something, Jerry, Or by the way, if Kirk does something to you, we'll do it right back to him. Like there's
yeah. I
I
mean,
don't know. It's raw to me.
it's
It's
like
authentic.
you just look at everything that Kirk, like I legitimately think that if Kirk decided when he quit, or if he just decided to stay at radio.com, collect his paycheck, and then just kind of live off the fruit of the land, and
Yep.
not really go into broadcasting, I truly think the Jerry Callahan podcast would be somewhere in the vicinity of who's the new podcast, Mike Salk,
Yep.
where they were talking about. I think Jerry would be maybe a little bit bigger than that, but where would he be without Kirk? I mean, you look at it. Okay, so he started off. He needed a producer. Before he had you, he was talking all about Steve Robinson helping him out. He's asking him to cut promos and do all these things for him. He gets you. He gets Carano. Even in the meantime, when they were looking for, but when they hired Marine Pat or whatever, those two shows. It was like who stepped in, Carano, and who else? Fucking Blind Mike's producer, Craig.
Yep.
And it's like there's no chance.
I did say on the show though, it is a little fucked up, just because like Kirk, I said it on the show, he is the podcasting world in this area, right? So it's like I get where you're coming from with all those things, but it also is like this default of, okay, if I want to make a podcast successful, or if I'm trying to build one, well, who's doing it locally of any sort of relevance? And Kirk is legitimately like the only person that comes up. So and it's not a full-fledged, like he definitely should be grateful for the opportunities and kind of the, let's just say, I'm trying to think of I'm blanking on the word to say, but like whether it be me, Carano, Craig, whatever, the affiliation association has helped Jerry for sure. And I don't know. I don't know if they talk behind the scenes. Maybe he hasn't said like thank you for some of that help. I have no idea. You know, it feels
I
that way.
I I doubt he has. I mean, he
Yeah.
just constantly. I have a bunch of stuff written down.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what like Kirk was talking. He's like, listen, I've done so much for your show. You know, I'm promoting it. Uh, you know, the only other time I believe Jerry has come on KMS was when he started the Callahan podcast. Like he never came on before then. He didn't come on after then to
Well, did
not
they
even just
want
to,
him to though? Like that's a question. Like, was he ever invited to come on as a
well did
guest in any form?
did Kirk want him on the first time to talk about the Callahan podcast, or was he doing that as like a favor to
Yeah,
Jerry?
but I assume that Kirk like reached out to Jerry. Like that's just being a good friend, right? Like I to your point though, I think that's coming from Kirk's side and not Jerry's side. So it's still kind
I,
of the same thing, right?
I
It's Kirk doing more and going above and beyond.
Yeah, I guess, but then so Kirk's like, hey, listen, you know, I tell people to subscribe, you know,
Yep.
give it a chance, you know, if you want more politics. I know a lot of people liked Kirk and Callahan for the political aspect of it. Kirk has said like, that's not really my show. Go listen to
Absolutely.
Jerry if you
Yep.
want to do that. And the first thing Jerry says is, yeah, well, you're also the only person to tell people to unsubscribe. So
Yep.
I don't necessarily know if
But that's
Jerry
raw. Like
understands.
that's a real thing too, though. Like that's if you believe that that has impact on your show. Like there is like you do have the ability to be a good guy and like kind of be an asshole at the same time. Just like Jerry has, but he's an asshole for not being as grateful. But then I'm sure he's a good guy, and I don't know. It's not coming. It's not coming to me right now. But I'm sure at
Yeah,
some point in the last year and a half he was a good guy. Actually, I defended Jerry with some of the stuff during the mental health break that I just and it came up on the show too. I told Kirk I just didn't agree with some of the way that was all handled. That doesn't
like
necessarily
like
be.
like the retweeting and like the hey, like if you're not listening to the Kirk Minahan show, come on over to
Yeah,
the.
he's brought that up multiple times. I don't really remember that from my end. And
I
if
do.
it was, it wasn't as it definitely did not. I said that too to Kirk. Like it definitely was not like come here, look at me as like a malicious attempt because I always did think that
Yeah,
Jerry did
I don't
have
think it was
Kirk's
a
best interest, but it
I
just
don't
that
think
doesn't
it
mean Kirk shouldn't feel the way he does.
I don't think it was a malicious attempt either. I just think
Yeah,
it was Jerry like, oh, how can I use Kirk to kind of gain my little following again?
yeah,
And he did it. Um,
yeah.
yeah, I
I
don't
mean,
know.
listen, yeah. Go ahead.
My biggest
It's
takeaway
tough. Yeah,
my biggest takeaway from yesterday's show is that Jerry wants nothing to do with Kirk besides his promotion. Um, he kept looking at his phone to see if he wanted to go. I don't know what he had to do. I think he wanted to go home and watch the Patriots game, make sure he made it in home time for the Patriots game. That could be completely false, but that's what I got because near the end of the show, he was saying like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to go home, you know, be a man and drink some beers and watch
yeah, yeah.
Patriots games or whatever." And 30 minutes in, he's checking his phone like, "I don't know if I have to go yet." I think he was trying to look for a little cop out. I think the entire thing made it awkward. He wanted to plug his his Patreon or his locals or whatever it is, and he did that, and then he was like, "Well, I don't really know." And I think Kirk kind of got that like notion too at one point where he's like, "Yeah, well,
Just
like
go.
you have
Yeah.
to go,
He's like, yeah,
like
we'll
just
wrap
go."
up. Just go if you need to go. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think it's as and back to that word malicious. I don't think it's as malicious or intense as kind of the way you're making it out to be, but it that doesn't really matter sometimes. It's like it's the
Hmm.
way it comes off. And the way it came off clearly to Kirk was probably agreeing with a lot of what you're saying. Because it was like there really wasn't a ton of laughs. Like and it's and Kirk kept trying to pull it like somewhat tried to keep pulling it out of him with some of the Bobby Orr stuff, like you were mentioning before, and EEI stories, or even the ratings. But it just didn't seem to get there. It just seemed to go back to kind of that contentious stuff that,
Yeah,
to
and
be
I
honest, is
think
really like how many times are we going to go there? And by the way, if we've gone there a lot on the show, what the fuck has happened off the show, right? Like it's like this is round 700 at this point, you know?
yeah, well, you look at it and you say like, okay, well, Jerry kept saying like, do you black out in these moments? I really didn't know about the Atlanta incident that much, but I know that Kirk was going through something last
Yeah.
August.
Yep.
So there was all that, but Kirk has said he's like, I've apologized profusely, and Jerry's like, yeah, I know, but he's like, he just wants him to. I don't know if he wants to do Scouts honor, he wants to do like a pinky promise. I don't know like what else
It's
Kirk
irrational
can
either
do.
way. It's irrational. The guy is like he's being authentic in his struggles in the moment. You can't assume anything of a person who's going through what he went through in those moments. If today he's saying everything's in the clear, he feels good in the moment, everything happens, and he does something that's, worthwhile of calling you an asshole, that's a whole different story. But in those moments, you got to move on. You can't judge a person because you just don't know what the fuck is going on with them.
Yeah.
You just can't do it. So,
Yeah, I just think the entire show was just full of Kirk trying to make it a fun Kirk and Callahan reunion, give, KNC fans a little something, talk about old Dino stories, which KNC fans love.
yep,
And I feel like at every single moment, Jerry was just trying to pull like a little like he was like, oh, what was it? Like, yeah, Bruce treats people, or was it Bruce, or it was someone treats people under him like shit. And it was like, you wouldn't know anything about that, Kirk, like implying that Kirk treats people under him like shit. I mean,
yep,
I don't get that
yep.
at all. I mean, it's one thing to be a part of a show and at being bust balls and Kirk shits on you, but like I've never thought like Kirk ever has treated anyone
No,
under him like
no,
shit. Like
yeah,
like
it's
he's
silly.
like he's somewhat of like an Ellen who like looks down upon people that like work. Like I know like he
Yep.
looks down, but it's not like from a personal level. He
We're also
he doesn't
we're
think
not fucking kids. We're all adults. We can take it, and
yeah.
if we felt offended in any way, we can dish it right back or, say something about it. So that to me was just, yeah, that was nonsense. I will say it did seem, and we can say it's joyless after the fact, but everyone who was there, they seemed to have a great time just being around each other. It's always
Yep.
seems that way when the community of the show, this was Team Minahan, everybody who was on our team came from the show. Like they get together and it's a great experience. It's a great day. It was the same thing for Sacco. Obviously I haven't had as many of those opportunities as you've had, but it really is great to see kind of the fans getting together and having a good time together.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a blast. I mean, everyone who came out there had a good time. It's always fun listening to, I know this was probably like the smallest live show that was
Yep.
ever done, but people who showed up. Quantum Chris was there, Corona
Yep.
was there. It was a fun time.
I will say
But
this because it has come up this morning. My intentions originally were not to run. I clearly was not. I was not wearing running shoes. In the moment, though, I then was like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna run." I get up there. There were so many fucking people at the starting line. I'm going to the back of the whole thing. It was taking just fucking forever. I don't know. I forget the name of it was a fan of the show who I was with. I forget the name. I just looked over at him. It's probably the lowest point of my life. And I just said, fuck it. I'm not doing it. I'm not waiting for this anymore. And I just walked back and hung out with you for the next like. But I was actually kind of glad I did it because I got that video of Kirk crossing the finish line after. So that I was actually glad in the end. So listen, if you want to send me the course map, I'll show up to Andover and I'll run the fucking 5K. All right. I'll go do it. I'll put some running shoes on and I'll fucking do it. All right. So if you're going to keep giving me shit about it, but the intention was there. There was just too many fucking people. I got annoyed. What can I say?
yeah, I didn't run it either because I
Yeah.
wanted to. I didn't want to leave behind all the equipment,
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
there
And
in
we
the
didn't
open. It
know.
was
Yeah. We
all
also didn't
bad as
know how
shit. So
long. Yeah. We were so all over the place because we didn't know when we were going to start after, didn't know how long certain people were going to take. Notables, though, like Jesus Christ, like Turtle Boy almost won the fucking thing. Like Turtle Boy might have been like fifth or sixth actually, and then Kirk I think he was pretty soon after that as well. So it was a good showing across the board. It was a great day with the Minifans. Anything else going on that we can touch on behind the scenes? We'll wrap that up and we can talk about what Kirk just tweeted about. I don't think
I
anything else
think
crazy happened. Of course,
I
John Pelletier, like literally, we couldn't even start setting up, and he's already there. He'll show up wherever
yeah,
we go,
he's the man.
10 hours before he should be there. That's just his style.
He's the
He's a
man.
great guy, though. He's funny. So,
The last thing I want to say about the whole Kirk and Callahan situation is I really do think that Kirk is doing like I don't even know if he knows this, but like the fact that Kirk was like, "Hey, let's talk about this behind Callahan's paywall,"
yep,
is such like a charitable thing for him. I mean, Kirk could have said, "Hey, let's do this at Saco and not broadcast it to everyone." And I
yep,
guarantee you, tickets would have been would secondary market would be up like crazy
yep.
if that was the case. I just think it's just
That to me was like Jesus Christ. Like, can we just shut the fuck up about this? I'll talk about it on your show. If like, let's just get this out. Like, we're trying to have a good time and make people laugh that
no.
support
I
the
think Kirk
cause.
wanted to talk about it, and it was Jerry was like tiptoeing around it because there was no definite thing Kirk could have done. Like, did like if Kirk like got down on his knees and started crying and saying like I'm so sorry for what I said to you, like would that have been
No,
fine?
nothing. Yeah, nothing would
I
have
don't know.
changed. Yeah, well, he's
So
not going to get the whatever answer he's looking for. He's not going to get it from Kirk. So it's kind of just like just figure out what you want, right? Do you want to be
so
friends and move forward, or do you not? So
yeah,
that's
so
yeah.
I don't know. I think there's going to be a big bump in Callahan subscribers for the Friday episode, and then a bunch of people are going to
I don't know. Is
drop
that
off.
confirmed? Are they definitely? They just made it seem like he'd do any Friday. He's not doing. Is he definitely doing this Friday?
I have
We
no
can find
idea.
out tomorrow. Yeah, we can find out tomorrow. All right, yeah. So that'll wrap up the 5K talk. But thank you to everybody. If you guys are watching this now, thank you for signing up. Thank you for supporting an unbelievable cause. It was a great day. It was a beautiful day, by the way. It was unbelievable. So
I got
thank you
some
for
sun.
doing that. You got yeah, we all got some sun yesterday. So thank you for doing that. We'll be back tomorrow. We got a weird schedule this week. So Quantum Week Chris is tomorrow on Tuesday. Mike is on Wednesday as he normally is, and then the Rocket is back on Friday. It has been a long time since the Rocket's
Is
been.
this your first time with the Rocket?
No, this will be the
No,
second
it's the
time.
second time,
Yeah,
right?
he came in once before. Yeah, he came in once before. I'm trying to think. It was a good month and a half, 2 months ago. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for the Rocket. Oh, that was the last thing I wanted to bring up from yesterday's show is that it was kind of Kirk at one point was like, so going forward, he could see like Mike one day, Chris
Yep.
one day, and the
Yep.
Rocket one day, which I really like. I like the idea of kind of having three different shows that fall under the same show.
Yep.
And people and Kirk said like, oh, the biggest like feedback he got is that people are down on the Rocket. And I think that's just kind of recency bias.
Yep.
I said this before when Jared was new and everyone was sucking Jared's dick saying, oh my God, he's so much better than Mike. And, the Jared shows are the best. I think it's just recency bias with Chris. I personally would probably say Mike's my favorite. Jared is, I mean, well, like I said, there's really no recent episode to kind of listen to, but I really do like Jared, and I think that he provides a great dynamic on the show
Yep.
when he was a regular guest. And yeah, I like Chris, but I would definitely rank it as Mike, Rocket, Chris right now.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. I would agree with that ranking. I also, and that's not like putting down Chris in any way too. I love, by the way, that Chris is definitely like comes the most prepared for an episode. Not that Mike isn't prepared
Yes,
like
yes.
behind the scenes. He knows what we're going to talk about. Like Chris will
But also,
reach
I
out.
think Chris needs to come the most prepared because
Maybe.
Mike's kind of like the comedy guy who can
Yeah.
riff, and Jared has stories and things going on in his life and contract and so but
Which
I
is
mean
true. That's
you
true.
were
Yeah.
I mean you were telling me before the show that you can't wait for Chris to leave.
Oh, please. I did not say that. I would be honest about that on this show. I
So
definitely, I agree with your ranking. I like Chris. I do think he has like, I don't know if it's like showmanship hate toward me. I don't know. I don't hate him at all on the show. It's a different show for sure.
it's like a personal hate
It's definitely what'd you say? Personal?
because you said you don't hate him like on the show, but so it's like a personal hate.
No. Well, you've heard us talk off the air, haven't you? Like I don't think we have anything
Yeah.
like no.
Yeah.
But then it's like it's a little aggressive on the show. But it doesn't bother me as long as like I don't know. I kind of like it. I think it's funny. And then if I go back at him or it's some sarcastic, whatever, I don't know. As long as people are talking about it, enjoying it, hating one person, liking the other, who cares? As long as it's getting reaction, that's a good thing. But I like where Kirk's head's at with it for sure. I always think like the more bodies you can have, the better, the more characters that can be created.
Especially the more comfortable they get and
Yeah,
everything
and that's
like
why
that,
like
so.
Mike separates himself with you, like because Mike has been there since day one. At some cases, it was 5 days a week, and then some cases it was 2 days a week, and then now if that
Mhm.
became 1 day a week, maybe that show changes a little bit because the relationship did. But you kind of just like find your way. So I like the mentality of more people being a part of the show in that way. So that'll be good to see how that all plays out and go from there. Kirk did just tweet too, by the way. EEI, look, we brought this up on the show because I actually thought Steve Peralt was hosting this. Steve Peralt is leaving to go to Odyssey, apparently, as part of kind of their BetQL thing, we think. But EEI just tweeted they're looking for a Red Sox podcast host in the area. So Kirk retweeted it and said, you know what to do, Minute fans. But don't they have like 25 people at EEI who are almost like focused on Red Sox? Like, why do they need to find? Shouldn't Bradford be doing that, or shouldn't I don't know, like the host of the pre-show?
That's who it was. When Kirk announced Bradford was dead.
Yeah. Oh, Bradford. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
from earlier. Yes, yes.
Yep. Yeah.
But yeah, no, you think they would just go in house for that and just kind of tack it on instead of hiring a completely new person and
Yeah.
giving them a salary? But what
He
do I
was
know?
dead on though. The other day he was dead on. He was talking about how like Odyssey and BetQL are just going to try to plagiarize Barstool and the
Oh,
the watch
it's
alongs
yep.
and it's just it's I don't know. I actually watched a tiny bit when she first got announced. I don't know if you were back at that point or not of Trista's show. And
No, I have
it
not.
was just fucking brutal. It was
Well, I
brutal.
mean, did you listen to her show on Barstool?
I did. I did.
It
I
was
thought
also brutal. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, but she like on this show at least, the one I listened to, like she brings the most life to it. So that's just gonna show you where they're kind of going to it. But we're definitely dead on. Like they're gonna try to hire kind of like the fringe Barstool people or try to steal kind of the people that haven't exploded within Barstool, try to recruit
let's
them and
go.
stuff like that.
Blind Mike, 7-figure contract,
We'll
baby.
see. We'll see. That'd be a good one to go after if I were Odyssey. So all right, so tomorrow, yes, we have Chris on a Tuesday instead of a Friday, and we'll see what tomorrow brings. Obviously, we'll recap the 5K from Kirk's perspective. I'm sure plenty more will come up at that point. We get to see Monkey Boy for the second time. First time was quite jarring in the moment, so now that we've had time to digest Monkey Boy, maybe we'll talk about it again tomorrow. So,
Ooh,
all right. Yep, all good. We will talk to you. It's the September 20th edition of From Justin to Cully. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.
awesome. Bye.